Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reasonably Effective Podcast. I'm Ten Types, joined by Uncommon Fossil as always.
Hello, glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to today's episode. We're going to be talking Shrouded Fable. That is the mini set that's coming out August 2nd, I believe, IRL. It probably comes to live August 1st on the Thursday, I think. It's hard to figure out. There hasn't been an official announcement, but that seems to be when things usually happen there. So we're getting a bunch of new cards that some of which are good. It's for we're not competitive players, so we're not concerned about that. Obviously, if you think about that, these will be in Worlds, which is the first time IRL play happens. But then also just new decks and just tweaks to existing decks are always fun to consider.
Yeah, and these cards have been out in Japan for a little while, so you can look at Japanese deck lists in various places. And so I've seen some of those. I don't think you have, right? You don't really look at Japanese deck lists.
Not too much. I mean, honestly, I don't. We talk sometimes about future cards, but in terms of what I pay attention to, it's really the cards in format at the time. We're getting close enough. I'm kind of thinking through these new cards more. What cards might I want to drop into some current decks is what I'm thinking about because I'm trying to live in the moment. That's my life philosophy.
I guess so. I don't know about that, but yeah. Anyway, so there's a bunch of cool cards in this set, as you said, and I think this is a really good mini set. I think it's one of the best mini sets we've seen recently. I mean, I don't know, 151 was like good, I guess, but I think this is better than 151. What do you think?
Yeah, I think as we get through that, there are some definitely strong cards in and of themselves. There's a number of interesting things. So, I think honestly, the big cards in this set, to me, are a little underwhelming. We'll get to those, I'm sure, but I think there are some interesting ones and some things that are going to make a difference. So, I think it's good for the game. It's a good
Yeah,
set.
yeah, but let's start off with what I guess are the main cards, which you said which you're not a big fan of. So let's start with there's the Loyal Three, and they all have EXs, and then there's Pekarunt, which also has an EX, and it's a little
Right.
weird. Loyal Three, obviously it's a trio, but we'll talk about it. The trio isn't exactly the same trio you might be thinking, but first we have Pheasantipede EX, which I'm just going to mention now. It doesn't really synergize with any of the other Loyal 3. It's a good card, but we're going to talk about it, I think, later, right?
Oh, are we?
Or do you want to
Okay.
talk about it
I,
now?
I just figured we'd talk about it now. I think this is of the loyal three just are what Okie Dokie EX, Monkey Dory EX, and Pheasantipede EX, and they're all loyal to Pencharunt. But Pheasantipede doesn't really work with the other loyal three, right? That's what
Yeah,
you're
or
getting
or
at.
Pekrat. Or we could talk about it now, though. That's fine. So you want to introduce it then?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the best cards. Well, it may be one of the best cards in the set. That we'll consider this. So it's got an ability, take advantage. Now, the names of these some of the translations might not be correct. So we'll find out what they are at the end of the day. But take advantage. What it does is correct. Take advantage once during your turn if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. You may draw 3 cards. You can't use more than one take advantage ability each turn. So that is what Oricorio EX did in the past,
GX.
and Oricorio GX. Sorry, correct. I thought every card was named EX. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. Most are, but not quite.
Yeah. So it saw play for sure. I mean, when we kind of started playing more regularly, that was kind of towards the tail end of the GX era. And one of the budget card decks that came up that I could afford in PTCGO was Mad Party or Coeo GX went in that. So a deck like a single prize attacking deck where you're getting knocked out regularly can really take advantage of a card like this. Drawing 3 more cards is very good. So I think it's going to slot into a lot of decks. And the attack and stuff and the stats are better than the old Oracle EX as well. It's got 210 HP. It was maybe 180 or something on the Oracle. I don't remember right now. Its attack wasn't very good, but this attack, if you can power it up, you might not be able to power. Well, it's a colorless energy, so you could power it up in any deck essentially. But I don't know if you can get the 3 energies on it. But it does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for 3 colors. That's powering up like this is tricky, but hitting any Pokemon for 100 is also nice. So it's got potentially attack that some decks will take advantage of as well.
Yeah, was Oricorio played that much in Mad Party? I know it was played in single prize decks. I feel like Mad Party played. It obviously played Dedenne GX.
Yeah, the Dena
Yeah.
GX was the key card, but Yeah, it was Dancer Tributes. That was 170 HP. So, one could say with power. And generally, even today, support Pokemon are below 200 HP. So this is high HP for what's really primarily a support Pokemon. That makes it better too. And the attacks all had psychic energy in it, and the attack was for psychic colors 80 damage. So this attack is just much better than that attack on Pheasantipity, which is good to see.
Yeah. Pheasantip's attack is pretty solid. And its ability is really nice, even in decks that aren't single prize decks. Like,
Hmm.
if you were playing like Raging Bolt EX, which is essentially all multi-prizers, you're only getting knocked out
Yeah.
twice over the course of the game. But this still is 6 extra cards you're drawing, so that's still good. But then if you're a single prize deck and you're drawing, if you're getting knocked out 5 times, let's say you use this 4 of the 5 because maybe you
Hmm.
miss it once, that's still
Yeah.
12 extra cards, and that's really good.
Yeah, so look, this is a card that potentially can go into essentially any deck, right? Because every deck's you're getting knocked out some. So it's what it makes sense in will take time to figure out. And like I said, if you have a deck that can power it up, that's even better. Because uh, yeah, hitting the bench and stuff is a nice thing. So yeah, I mean it's a good card, right? You would agree, and it's going to see play.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting in Lost Zone. Lost Zone's certainly some
Hmm.
single prizers, and it also has an issue where if you get hit by a late game, whatever disruption card, Iona, Roxanne,
Right.
Unfair Stamp, which could be early game, then this is really good to help you kind of get out of those situations.
Right, and Lost Zone can power it up too, with
Yeah,
as
yeah,
long as it plays Mirage Gate. So that's yeah, I think you're right. That's probably a really good deck for it. It's a single prize and tends to have some multi-prize attackers. It depends. So this might even be the only multi-prize attack Pokemon in it. So yeah, a deck like that, I probably wants it. I'm not sure if all decks want it or not.
yeah. I don't think it's not going in every deck, but it's yeah, as you said earlier, it's a consideration in every deck. But I think let's move on to the other loyal three.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Okidogi EX, which is kind of like the main one here, and it's a first attack poison. First of all, 250 HP. That's really high.
Yep.
But we need to talk about that. It does damage itself, so it's not that impressive. But poison muscle for one colorless, it does search your deck for up to 2 basic darkness energies. Attach them to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. And if you did, then this Pokemon is now poisoned. So that's kind of weird. But then you see the second attack here for 2 darkness energy and a
Right.
colorless. It does Crazy Chain 130, but if it's poisoned, it does 130 more. So that's going to be doing 260. And 260 is okay, right?
It's it's good, but you wish it was more. Look, it's one shotting all basic EXs and Vs, so that's great. It's not generally taking out the evolutions.
Yeah, I mean it's taking out certain like stage 1 EXs it can be taking out. I guess they don't see that much play,
Some,
but like
yeah,
Gold go at one shots. But then we did talk about some other cards here. So first of all, I will say Pekrin EX does poison yourself, so you can use that to get the poison on. There's Dark Patch to accelerate darkness energies. But then there's the supported Janine Secret Technique. Choose up to 2 of your Darkness Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic Darkness Energy card, attach it to that Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. And if you
hmm
attach energy to the active, that Pokemon's now poisoned. And then there's also the tool card here, Biting Mochi, which says the attacks of poison Pokemon this card is attached to do 40 more damage to your opponent's active. This is a really interesting card. I want to get into
right.
more detail outside of the Loyal 3, but I think it's like an obvious inclusion with the Okidogi EX because it's just a bunch more damage.
Oh yeah, right. Because we said we're at what 260, so now we're at 300, so that's very nice. Um, and yeah, so I'm liking it a lot. That's a really good combo. I will say you're not going to want me bringing it up, but with Janine's secret technique, then it does that ties into Crobat, right? So
Uh,
which could
yeah.
go in this deck. It really could.
So Crobat, you wanna read it out for us?
Yeah, let me find it. Sorry, it's how come I'm not finding
Okay,
it
I
here?
got it. It's here. So Shadow
Okay,
Envoy. It
I
says
yeah,
once during a turn, if you played Janine's Secret Technique, the supporter we just mentioned, from your hand during this turn, you may draw cards from your. You may draw until you have 8 cards in hand. However, this is a supporter that doesn't like help you. I mean, it's a good supporter, but this ability it only works after you've already played the supporter, and usually the card that you'll be looking for is the supporter. So into stage two, it does have free retreat, has a usable attack, but it's I think the ability is pretty bad.
Well, look, drawing till I have 8 cards in hand is very good.
Yeah, it
You'd
is.
agree with that. But yes, you have to already have this evolved before you play Janine's Secret, or
Technique.
yeah, Janine's Secret Technique. But if you're playing Janine's Secret Technique in a deck, which I think you're playing in the Okie Dokie deck, then you might do it, right?
I don't know. I
You
feel
could.
like it's pretty rough because this is stage two. It's an all basic deck normally, and I don't know. It seems awkward. Like maybe it's worth it, but I don't know. I feel like it's not. I feel like it's kind of bad.
You might be right. I'll just say if you're not playing the Crobat in the Okie Dokie deck, you're not playing the Crobat ever, right? But
Yeah.
I want to bring up because it is the Pokemon designed to work with that supporter, so I think it fit in the conversation there.
I guess
Uh,
so.
I know you
Like a
didn't want to talk
square peg
Crobat.
in a round hole. Fits perfectly.
Well, no, it's the card to work with that supporter, right? Which you need that supporter for Okie Dokie because I really don't want to be attacking with Poison Muscle one turn and then to set up your crazy chain. You could. You have 250 HP. Now you are getting poisoned twice before you get your turn again, so you're down to 230. So you hope you don't get knocked out, but you really want to be doing crazy chain your first turn, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's a little awkward because you need Dark Patch as well because it only well, it accelerates two energies, but only one to a single Pokemon. So it is a
Right.
little awkward. But yeah, and then I think let's talk about. I want to mention Pekka now. It's not the loyal three,
Yep.
but I feel like we need to talk about it. Its ability controlling chains once during a turn. You may switch one of your bench darkness Pokemon, except Pekka EX for whatever reason, with your
hmm
active, and then if you do, your new active is now poisoned, and you can't use more than one controlling chains ability each turn. That seems like super weird. Like, why would you do that
Why do you want to
anyway?
do that?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's certain texts that they've added to some of these cards that see a little odd that they put limitations on. But look, obviously, controlling, as you said, you need 3 energies to attack with your Okie Dokie. You can only get 2 on if you use your supporter and you attach per turn. So then you have to use dark patch, which only worked from the bench. So you're using a dark patch as well, and then you swing into the active. So it works together as a set. And if you obviously don't need the tool, the supporter, you could just dark patch twice and attach as well. But you're needing some combination over your turns to make. Assuming you need to attack for the 260 with Okie Dokie every turn with this deck, I assume is the game plan.
yeah, and then Pokemon EX does also have an attack here, Irritating Burst for 2 Darkest Energy. It's a 60 times multiplier for each prize your opponent's taken, so this can be hitting
Yep.
potentially. Well, technically, it can hit infinite damage, but that's not gonna happen in expanded. But it could be hitting up to 240 or 300, depending how the
Right.
prize race goes. Um, well, okay, technically there are ways to take extra prizes coming soon, and even in standard. But you're probably not happening to your Okidoki EX. But Pekkerman EX is a solid attacking option as well. It's not like perfect, but it's okay.
Yeah, look, it's a 2 energies instead of the 3, so there's going to be even times that the Okie Dokie does more, but this is all you can power up. And if it takes the knockout, that's better than not taking the knockout. The HP is lower; it's below 200, so he's probably getting one shot. But yeah, it's the ability is really the big reason why it's here. The attack is secondary, but it's a nice thing. And then, of course, and I assume we're going to talk the Monkey Dory next that fits
Yeah,
in
yeah.
with this.
You wanna talk about that one?
Yeah, so the Monkey Dory EX, one of the loyal 3 again. It's got the ability skip a beat if this Pokemon's knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon. If you have Pekarunt EX in play, your opponent takes 1 fewer prize. So it only gives up 1 prize when it's knocked out. That's quite nice there. Now, you want it because you're attacking with it. You just don't put it in play because it gives up 1 less prize just to sit there. So the attack 190 for 3 energies, and then it can't attack the following turn. It's definitely a worse attacker than Okie Dokie. I feel pretty confident that that's the case, at least most of the time. So maybe you don't play it. Maybe you do because it gives up 1 prize. Maybe you don't. I'm not sure
I
the
think it's
count. And
pretty good because it's like a single prize, right? So
Yeah.
and there's a single price Snorlax attacker that does 180 for 3, and that one's okay. It also has 150
Hmm.
HP immune to effects of attacks, and that one's pretty, it's like kind of tanky-ish, but this is like as a single prizer. If you view this as just a single prizer, which it
Hmm.
isn't, but it kind of is, um,
Right.
210 HP, 190 damage for 3 is really good. It's a really underwhelming two prizer. Not terrible, but certainly
Yeah.
underwhelming, ignoring the ability. But with the ability, I think it's really solid.
Right. Yeah. If your opponent shuts off the ability through something, that's really bad, right? Including like if your opponent plays no. Yeah, if your opponent plays capturing cologne, canceling cologne, right? Then they take two prizes.
Yeah, there are different ways to get through this. Roaring Moon EX, Iron Thorns EX, Flutter Mane, different things like that. But I think it's
Hmm.
still okay. I mean, even as a two prizer, like getting knocked out as a two prizer, it is what it is. And this could
Yeah.
be doing with Binding Mochi 230, which is one-shotting a lot of basic, pretty much all basic Pokemon. There are a few that you don't one-shot, um, but I think it's solid.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think in the Okie Dokie deck, I think of it, it's going to be an Okie Dokie deck. You're going to play Pekarunt, and you're going to have Monkey Dory, and I'm not sure what the counts are. I still, with my inclination, is the Okie Dokie is the main attacker in it, just because the high HP and the the very solid damage it does.
Maybe I think it's like split between Monkey Dory and Okidogi because Monkey Dory like also you can attack with more Monkey Dories. You can attack with four Monkey Dories and not lose the game. But you once your
Yes.
three Okidogis get knocked out, you just lose.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. One of the interesting decisions is how many P.E.K.K.A runs do you include? Like, are you just including like two in the deck because it's just because you just want to sit there while you attack with your Monkey Dory? But then if you do that as your opponent targets your P.E.K.K.A runs, you run out of those, then your Monkey Dory becomes a two prizer. So how do you shape the deck in all? It gets interesting decisions, I think.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you can probably recover the Peck front easily as well. Of course, there'll be situations where you can't, but I feel like two
Yeah.
Peck front's like fair. Um, But then I do want to talk about Pekron EX as well in other decks. So Pekron EX
Hmm.
it switches, and that's really good against Snorlax. Charizard EX, you've
Right.
been playing that some, and that's a really good deck. And it has issues against Snorlax.
That's true, right? I forget. I tend to think wasn't thinking Charizard EX because Charizard, of course, one thinks of as a fire Pokemon, and all the basics and the stage ones are fire Pokemon. So, but yes, it is a darkness Pokemon. It does not like Snorlax at all. And obviously, you could play the psychic attacker that I'm blanking the name on right now. That stalls as well. That's in some ways a better.
Oh, Mawile, yeah. And there's also Wellspring Master upon EX, which I think sees more play right now. Um,
Yeah, because that one's more flexible. It's a two prizer, so it's tankier, but it gives us two prizes. It's got its trade offs, and it's got another attack that's pretty good. So any of those things, this also gets around that as well, and it just lets you. So it's good for that, and in any deck also, if in a tank like a tanky deck where you want to just get your attacker to the bench, but you don't have to, you don't need a switching card also for other matchups too. Like with Charizard EX, even in non-stall decks, just getting, your Charizard EX isn't getting knocked out easily. So just being able to switch to a second one, and obviously they power up very easily. You don't need to get a switch card in the way. You don't need to use, you say, your Pidgeot EX to get a switching card. You can get something else. You can get a boss with it and still get your switch off. It has possibilities.
yeah, and Charizard sometimes plays Chair Scenario, but has issues. And then
Hmm.
Pekavant EX here. Also, it does poison, which isn't normally ideal, but then there is Binding Mochi, which just says the we talked about earlier, you do 40 more damage if you're
Hmm.
poisoned. Sticking that on Charizard
Right.
EX, Charizard EX really loves damage buffs.
Right, which we'll get to more obviously. That's I mean, just screams Charizard EX to me. But now you're going from 180 to 220, and that for a lot of Pokemon, there's a lot of multi-prize basics that you can knock out at 220. So that's very big. Obviously, you have to get the P.E.K.K.A Runt. You have to swing from the bench to the active. You've got to get the tool. Can you get those things in play early? Because it's an early thing with Charizard in particular, because as the game goes on, your opponent takes prizes, and Charizard just naturally does more damage.
Yeah, but then you do also have you play lots of Irons, right? And oftentimes the tool isn't that important. In the early game, you're probably
Correct.
going for Force Seal Stone, but you might already have it or whatever. There are various
Hmm.
things that can happen, and so I feel like Mighty Mochi is not that hard to get. And then you brought up like Pekaron, sending up a certain Pokemon, like it's kind of it can do something interesting. So one of my favorite cards in the game that I don't play, to be honest, but
Mhm.
it's really cool is Zubat from 151, and it has the ability Revealing Echo, and also has one retreat, so you could stick Rescue Board or whatever. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may have your opponent reveal their hand. So obviously, giving you hand knowledge here, you can
Mhm.
send it up with Pekaron, and then it is poison, but then you just retreat it with Rescue Board. So then you get hand knowledge every turn, which I think
Mhm.
could be really cool.
Yeah. Now control decks. Yeah. I mean, can you afford those pieces in your deck? Maybe. But yeah. I mean, hand knowledge is good for sure. And and if you're sending up something during your turn, and then retreating it, you don't even it doesn't even take damage from the poison because that's not till
Exactly, yeah.
after your turn ends. So, right, and you have the rescue board. Its retreat cost is 1, so you can swing it back to the bench.
Yeah, and you could speed score. You could do different things, and I know you would play this in. I feel like it's not just enough value right on its own. I mean, it could be, but it depends. But you could put this in like Charizard maybe. It's a lot of pieces and a lot of specifically bench space, but I think it's interesting. But I think I want to move on to the Dartrix next. This one is interesting. Quite simply because of its attack name, and it has United Wings. As a stage 1
Yes.
Pokemon, has United Wings. United Wings has been printed on 4 Pokemon, and it does for 1 colorless. Well, okay, this one does for 1 colorless. The other ones are all different attack costs,
Hmm.
generally. So it does 20 damage to each Pokemon in your discard pile that has the United Wings attack. And so previously, United Wings would max out at you could use Ditto to copy it from the discard, but then it would be doing
Right.
240, but now you can be hitting up to, if you have all 16, you can be hitting 320, which is essentially impossible. But um, you can now be hitting much higher damage and easier.
Right.
You cannot get this off of Hisuian Heavy Ball though, which is a bit of a downside, but it's still really good.
No, yeah, and you said there were 4 United Wings. This is the fourth. Before this, there
Yeah,
were only 3. So it now gets to the level of the Mad Party, right? That was a little while ago, and then obviously we had the much older ones too. But Mad Party is what is in recent history, and obviously we need to get to
again,
the
it's not
same route.
that recent. It was like a year and a half ago that it rotated.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, correct. But yeah, my point is, you can't be hitting for less damage than what the previous similar card was and think it's going to be viable. So it
No.
really needed this. It's an interesting one. Look, it's 1 color's energy, which is good. It hits for grass weakness, which is that's good, right? We know Charizard EX. We talked about that. Is obviously grass weak. So do you then do you play Rowlet in the deck or not? Right? Because is this an evolution that you don't play the basic that you just want to get 4 in the discard pile? Possibly, but you might want to have 1 or 2 basics as well. That's part of the deck construction question. So having different weaknesses is good because the Mad, United Wings already had that. That was better than Mad Party in some ways for weakness. It's more of a weakness box deck, I think. United Wings, and it just needs the damage level. So, and we do have the one, what the evolution lightning Pokemon that hits the bench based on United Wings part Pokemon in the discard pile as well, right? So you
Yeah.
have a bench hit snipe as well. It's a lower multiplier, right? From what I recall, I'm trying
Yeah,
to remember
just a
what.
10 times multiplier. So it's underwhelming, but it's not completely terrible.
Yeah, and I kind of was trying to take a look at that, but United Wings was so bad at the time, I just didn't play it. But now with the Dartrix, do I, just some of the options, single prize attacking decks that do very solid damage. Because of this, you can get to one-shotting a basic EX or V much easier, much faster, and like a V Star or a Stage 1 EX, those are going to be within reach before the game moves on too long, and that's really what you need with a single prize deck.
Yeah, and I also think that the weakness thing is a big deal. It's somewhat of a big deal. Charizard was realistically the best deck in format, but now it's most people don't think it is, and I agree with that.
Hmm.
But It's still a good weakness. You got lightning weakness, you got darkness weakness, and so you can hit a
Yeah.
bunch of decks for weakness. And then you also have the fact that the attacks are way easier to pay than Mad Party. Mad Party,
Hmm.
some of the attacks were essentially completely unpayable, but that's not true now. They're all very payable.
Right, and Mad Party relied on special energies. This, United Wings does not. So, yeah, how good United Wings will be, I'm not sure. I'm definitely going to play it because I enjoyed Mad Party, and I think people like single prize decks, and they kind of it's a bit of a gimmick, I guess, the United Wings, but it's a type of thing that's fun, and that I think most people want to give it a try.
Yeah. Next up, we got some other interesting single prizers. The Dusclops and Dusknoir, which I always get confused which one's which. Um, but Dusclops is the stage 1, Dusknoir is the stage 2. They both have the same ability that acts slightly
Hmm.
differently, same name though, and here it's translated as Cursed Bomb. Who once during your turn, you may put a certain amount of damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, and then if you did, this Pokemon is knocked out. Dusclops is going to place 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Dusknoir is
Right.
stage 2, placing 13, and
Hmm.
these cannot be spread around. Um, but what are your thoughts on these cards?
Yeah, very good. Now you skipped over the Dust Skull, so I'm just gonna
Oh, what's it
give
do?
him a call out. That's the basic because it's a stage one and stage two. So, but the Dust Skull does have the meetup attack, and if you have Psychic Energies, that gets 3 Dust Skulls in play from the discard pile. So well, you have to play Dust Skull anyway, so maybe it actually sees a little bit of attacking use. But look, putting damage counters where you want is very good. Giving up prizes is historically bad, but in a lot of ways it's good. And certainly for Charizard EX, this becomes very good. Um, my thought is you're probably going to stick with the stage one just because it's so much easier to play than get and play than stage two. But that'll be interesting to see what the different numbers are. But obviously, when you give up prizes, besides the damage counters, I mean Charizard EX now you're doing more damage, which is one of the problems with Charizard EX early games. So potentially, like turn two, you can knock out one of your own Pokemon. You get that 30 more damage there, and you place the damage counters potentially on the active you're hitting into, or you can spread it around. So that's quite nice there for sure. So I like it, and also things like Counter Catcher get activated, which are very good. Things like Defiance Band you can activate potentially by putting yourself behind the prizes as well. So these are all things to either do some gusting, hit more damage on top of the damage counter. So I think it's pretty interesting. I think this is, I mean, to me, this is probably the most interesting set of cards in the set.
Yeah, they're really cool. I think with Charizard EX, I think with Blood Mirror Saluna EX as well, maybe
Hmm.
Dragapult EX. And decks that are stage 2 decks that play Rare Candy, it is kind of nice because then you can easily play the Dust Noir or fit that in.
Right.
But then also, it's another Rare Candy, so it's kind of awkward in that regard. Also, I was just thinking about expanded. Normally we talk about standard, but there's the
Hmm.
Duskull. This one, we're talking about Mad Party a lot today, I guess. This is the one, you know it as the one that discards 3 cards to your hand on Common Fossil. But if you
Oh
do, you have
yeah.
to search for a card that evolves from this Pokemon. So you can turn one, going first, get, well, literally as many Dusclopses as you want. So you could actually, so this could be Donk and expanded. Donk will be back. Let's go. No, that's definitely bad. But
That's not a good thing. Yeah, the donk. We don't need to get better, and we don't need control to get better either. But I think we're going to see that happening too.
yeah,
So
oh, and Donk, by the way, if you don't know, is well, it's referred to as a few different things, but generally turn one wins or winning before your opponent gets a chance to bench like an extra Pokemon.
right, I think if you go first and you knock out your opponent on your second turn, as long as they don't get a bench Pokemon, that may be donk. But that we could probably debate that for an hour, and we don't care enough about that. I don't think
No.
to do.
But where do you want to go next?
All right, so let's see what did I want to cover. I should we talk about Kiram and the Colorist's tenacity?
Yeah. So Kyurem has its attack Trifrost. There we go. For water, metal, metal. No, sorry. Water, water, metal, metal, colorless. So 5 energy. All
Yeah.
of different types. It says discard all energy attached to this Pokemon as well. It does 110 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. That's insane, but super hard to pay. But then you have the ability Anti-Plasma is what's translated as. But if your opponent has a card with Colress in its name in their discard pile, the attack cost of this Pokemon is Trifrost is 1 colorless instead. So a technical machine won't be discounted. But yeah, you just do this attack, which is 110 to 3 Pokemon. for one colorless if they have colorless in their discard pile.
Right. And just briefly, there is a new colorist, which is up. Well, no, it's actually pretty good. I think the main reason, though, is colorist experiment, which is obviously very good. And there's a question: does Kiram just shut down Lost Zone? Because obviously you're taking three prizes essentially in a Lost Zone deck: the Comfy, the Cramorant, the Sableye. You're one shotting any and all of those however you want to.
Yeah,
So
if
that's
they don't
that's
have Manaphy in play.
that's true, right? Yeah, Manaphy obviously is important in the deck and becomes more important if you want to play it. Um, but Colress's Tenacity, search your deck for a Stadium card and Energy card, reveal them, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck is a very good. It's a very solid supporter for some decks as well.
Yeah, I will say, and it is one of the only ways to search out special energies right now. I
Right,
can't think of any off the top of my head. Oh, there's Archeops, but that's very different.
right. Well, you have Pidgeot obviously that
Yeah.
can, but oh, and there's a supporter. We're coming up, another supporter that could do that as well. That we'll
Oh,
get to.
yeah.
At least I want to get to it. Well,
I do
maybe.
as well.
And also, you do have Energy Lotto. That's the main thing now, but that's not a full search. You look at the top seven and put any energy there into hand. So, back a little while ago, a few years ago, there was Peers in format that searched for a Darkness Pokemon and any one energy. I like Eternus VMAX, so I would play Piers because I played the Hardening Dark Energy, and so it just worked well with that deck. I thought you would make fun of me for that, but then other decks just started playing Piers that weren't Darkness decks because that was the only way to search for special energy. So searching for special energy is important, and stadiums I think are becoming more important again in the game. So and this is one of the few ways also to search for a stadium.
Yeah, yeah. Stadiums aren't. I don't think they're super important. I mean, there are some good ones. Pokestop's still good. But there's some stadiums that caught your eye that we'll talk about later. But back to the Kyurem, I think it's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. In a few different use cases, but it's kind of Lost Zone. It's good. You could Manaphy if you're playing
Hmm.
Lost Zone and then it stops Kyurem mostly, but they can still hit 110 to the active for one, which is not bad. If you look at Cramorant, obviously that's a good card in Lost Zone. That does 110 for
Hmm.
free, but it does take some setup, so it's not really free. So this is
Right.
110 for one, has more HP, no weakness. I think this card, I mean, obviously it's bad for Lost Zone, but it's bad for Lost Zone even if they have Manaphy in play. Though it's not too terrible. Also, it doesn't get one-shotted by Iron Hands EX, so
Yeah.
yeah, if you're playing Lost Zone, this is super rough for you. So there's like regular Lost Zone decks, but then there are also like Lost Zone builds of say Dragapult EX, Charizard EX, or just lots of weird decks, and I think those
Hmm.
are gonna like be really bad because I think if you're playing Lost Zone, you're just adding another like weakness to your deck. So if you're playing regular Charizard, you're not worried about this, but if you're playing Charizard Lost Zone, Charizard EX Lost Zone, which
Right.
I don't think is that good or that common, but if you're playing that, then you're putting essentially a target on your back with Hiram.
Right. In Dragapult Lost Zone, I think that's because Dragapult getting that powered up is always tricky. So Dragapult EX. So I think I think it's certainly a viable option for Dragapult EX. The other thing I have played Colorless Experiment in non-Lost Zone decks as well, and other people do as well. I've found it to be useful in rare candy decks at times because I don't want to play research in those decks because rare candy researching away rare candies is can be kind of back really crushing with that. And a lot of times in those decks, if I have like access to the Pokemon or I have the rare candy. I just need the other piece. So it's something like Iono I found is bad as well because I kind of often just lose the piece I had. And instead, I get the other piece I needed, but I've lost the piece I have. So being able to look at five, put three in hand, on top, just adding to what you have, I think is pretty good in decks. But now with Kiram, depending on what it is, that's going to get tougher as well.
Yeah. Um, I don't think that's that common. I don't know. I know it was like common at one time, but then also I think it'll be pretty bad. I don't think the new colorless supporter, I don't think it's that bad, but I think the fact that you're now also setting yourself up to be weak to the Kyurem is really bad. So yeah, that I think that scares me.
Yeah, I mean, because part of Colress's tenacity, I think the play that look, I think like Jamming Tower, I think there are important stadiums, but you're right. The energy is the bigger deal. There's Neo Upper Energy but then really the big energy that some decks play is the Legacy Energy. So if you play Legacy Energy, you probably want to play Colress's
Well,
Tenacity
like
because you
in
don't.
what deck?
Well, not Lugia,
Yeah,
obviously.
because Lugia like can switch it out. Um, what else?
In my Arceus box deck, obviously.
Wait, what Arceus? Why are you playing
I don't
Legacy
know.
Energy in Arceus?
Well,
I know
I
Iron
can
Thorns plays it, but that's like not that good. I'm looking at Limitless,
in
and
the
I see
here.
Pidgeot control, which I can search out with Pidgeot, and then Iron Thorns, and then a bunch of Lugia. If I look at the Japanese database, it pops up in a deck here or there, but it's mostly just Lugia Arceus.
Look, you see when we talk offline, you're always critical of the IRL and how it's too narrow and not important. But now you quote it, right? When you
Well,
don't
no,
want when you want to knock a card, I want to
yeah.
bring up. But
I'll
anyway,
look
but
at
besides,
PokemonCard.io.
then you'll
And
get some spice and variety there.
yeah,
But look, early on, I think Legacy Energy was tried out more. Then obviously things narrow in as people kind of decide what's good collectively, and for the most part, that's good. I mean, they're generally making good decisions, but there is creativity gets lost in the process. So I kind of always want to think how can we broaden things is always what I'm thinking, and obviously searching for Legacy Energy now opens up those decks that were considering it early on.
yeah. It's played in the Ogerpon deck, which is
Hmm.
a deck, and it's played in
I like that deck.
yeah, I guess it's played in Frost. This person's Frostless spread deck, which is
Okay.
interesting, I guess. It could be played in different things. I mean, I played it in different things. I played it in Control. I like it in Control, I guess. And then it's not a bad card. It's a good card, but I think it's outclassed by. I mean, it's a card that like it doesn't help you set up at all. I mean,
It's
not really. It's just something that like can help you. It's kind of like a tech card, but then there is like really good aspects like Unfair Stand, Prime Catcher. And I think Secret Box is really good as well to help you out of bad like hands and like sketchy situations.
Yeah, look, I've heard it said, and I kind of agree that this Kiram that they printed Kiram as a lost zone counter. I don't think it needed a hard counter, but that's not neither here nor there. And in one sense, they tied it to Colress, and they wanted to justify the linking it to Colress. So they printed Colress's tenacity, even though it's really focused on Colress experiment. I think there's some truth to that. Colress experiment is the bigger, more significant card,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, oh, and I will say on PokemonCard.io, most of the Legacy Energy decks are also still Lugia. But anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, Kyurem though is cool. And then in Regidrago V-Star, Regidrago V-Star copies Dragon Pokemon, and Kyurem, it's a Dragon Pokemon, and its attack cost, if there isn't Colress, is
Well,
super terrible. But you can copy this with Regidrago V-Star. It is a basic, which is kind of annoying because you can start it, but
right.
it's still
The
really
problem.
powerful.
Look, I play more Regidrago V Star than you, so I want to talk about one more dragon then right after
Yeah,
this, just briefly. But the problem with Regidrago is you have to power up the Regidrago V Star. It's not easy to get powered up, so now you have to discard all your energy on your Regidrago V Star because it's grass fighting. So now
fire.
you have to grass fire. Yeah, thank you. So you're starting all over the next turn, and you usually don't want to be. You're hoping not to get one shot each turn, and you have a tough time getting those three energies into play every turn. So I don't. You kind of need it needs to be maybe closing out the game, but you can close out obviously. Especially if you've spread some damage around, you can win the game with this attack for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean this
So,
plus Dragapult. I think you like Dragapult EX and then you cure him, and that's
mhm,
really good. That's this is 330 damage. Dragapult is 260 damage, and these are being
yeah,
spread around across the board in a very controlled way. So I feel like you're going to be able to take just a ton of knockouts doing this.
yeah. Like you said, the downside to Regidrago is that it's a basic because you don't want it in play then because
Oh,
you're
the
never gonna
Kyurem is a basic, yeah.
the Kiram, right? Because you're never going to get it powered up. So
Yeah.
you're gonna
Well,
have to
that's not well.
turn it.
If they are playing Colress, then you can just you can also still easily get it powered up,
Oh, that's
and that's
true.
even easier. So then you could just play it normally, which isn't really true with any of the other attackers in the deck or dragon
Uh,
attackers.
that's true. That's true. If it's up against a Lost Zone deck, then you slap this into play and you're very happy about it. And then you might even then play a couple copies for if you're worried about the Lost Zone match. I'm not sure you are, but
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's probably pretty. I don't play Regidrago that much or Lost One. I play Control, but I don't just play Control. But
yeah.
yeah, do
So
you want
so
to bring up another dragon though?
Yeah, the other dragon, which is stage two, which is exactly the type, it's single prize stage two, and evolutions are what Reggie Drago loves because you don't ever have to start it. You just have to get it and discard it. Is the Haxorus, if that's the way you say it. And it's got two attacks. The first attack is something we're familiar with in the past, you and I, and it's got Axe Down's the name. But your opponent's active Pokemon, if your opponent's active Pokemon has any special energy attached, it's knocked out. So that is the single strike Beedrill's attack.
The
So
goat
yeah, that was one of your faves, and
yeah,
an
with
all star in
mustard.
your with mustard. Yeah. And we have some supporters that are kind of in that vein, but it doesn't pair with this Pokemon, I don't think. But as a stage two, I don't think you want to attack with the Haxorus directly. I think it makes sense though in Reggie Drago as attack mainly for that. And the second attack actually has value too. It does 230, which a lot of the attacks you're copying with Reggie Drago are not don't quite do that much damage to the active. So it actually even the second attack will have some value. Discard the top three cards of your deck, which could be good if you discard something you want, but of course there's a good chance you're discarding something you don't want and you'll be sad. But it's once you're set up with Reggie Drago, you can live with the discarding three cards most of the time.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's weird because Haxorus 230 is more than there's a lot that hit 200. Well, there's a few.
Right.
There's Dragapult EX, which is very good, 200 to the active, and then
Hmm.
Hisuian Gujavis are also 200 to the active, and those
Right.
are like they have no downside, they have an upside, and then there's this which has a downside, and there's also Giratina V-Star and Koraidon EX. Koraidon EX is a basic, which is annoying, as we mentioned a few times, but they
Right.
both do 280 and have downsides, which honestly might not even be that much worse than Haxorus's a downside with milling the top three. They might be better, but it is. I think it's a really solid option, Richard Draco.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely gonna. I like Reggie Draco. I'll definitely slot this in early on, mainly for the first attack. But I'm pretty sure there'll be games I attack with the second attack, and then it'll be interesting to see how much I'm okay with the discarding, or how many times that discarding three kind of ruins the rest of the game for me.
Yeah, and I will say, also, I don't know how useful the first attack is. Um, there aren't there's some special energy in the game, but a lot of
Hmm.
decks can kind of avoid it. And then Lugia, that's all special energy, but then they play Mist Energy, which will just stop this. So, we'll stop
Yeah,
the effect of the first attack.
right. And Lugia also likes to attack, which if they're attacking with Chinchino, it's a single prizer, so you'd rather just attack with like with Gudra, let's say, which obviously easily one shots it and then you take less damage, something like that,
Yeah, or
or
Dragapult.
Dragapult EX where you're spreading damage around. So it's more against
Or
high
Kyurem.
H.
Kyurem would be insane there. You just knock out all their Chinchinos. Um,
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's true. How valuable is this going to be right now? I'm not certain. Beedrill at one point, right? Mew came out, and Beedrill was the answer at one point for that.
I guess there are a number of answers, but yeah, I definitely think this card's cool and a solid consideration uh,
Reggie
in Reggie
Draco.
Draco, yeah. But
Yeah.
then there's one card that's I consider a staple that I think I want to talk about now, and that one is Nightly Stretcher or Night Stretcher or something. And it's an item card. It just says put a Pokemon
Yep.
or a basic energy card from Disco Pal into your hand. It's an item, so it's really solid. It's kind of like Super Odd, but it goes straight to your hand, but it gets less cards. I think it's a pretty good card. It'll see play in a lot of decks. It's really hard to rate exactly how good it is, but it's certainly very solid.
Well, this is a very good card. I'm excited about it. To me, the other card, comparable card, is an older card in Rescue Stretcher, and that was only Pokemon, so it didn't deal with energies, but one Pokemon to hand, or up to I believe it was three into the deck. So it was like half this and half Super Rod, which
Yeah,
which was which was good. Now, so some decks will definitely play a bunch. Some decks are going to play four of it too, like getting a basic energy
maybe.
back into.
I feel like
Well,
playing four is like
if you're playing Teal Mask Ogrepon, do you do this to get the
I don't
energies and
know.
then
I
you
mean, I think you
draw?
might play one. Maybe I'm underestimating it. Obviously, energies are really important in that deck because you can, of course, just attach them, and then you can also
Hmm.
discard them to do different things. It's solid. I think it's a very good card. I don't know. Four of seems a lot because in the
It
early game it's just kind of terrible.
Yeah, a lot of decks are going to play one or two of though. I
Yeah.
think like right now, like you look at deck lists, almost every list, competitive list plays a Lost Vacuum, right? And they only play one. They never play more than one, but they always play one. There's exceptions, but that's how it is. And I think Nightly Stretcher is going to be kind of, and you play a Rod, you're going to play a Nightly Stretcher probably in most decks is my guess. How
Yeah,
things
because
will sort
Super
out.
Rod's in most decks. It's not in every deck, but it's in a lot of decks. And
Hmm.
I think Nightly Stretcher is good. If you look at a deck like Gardevoir, they need to recover their Pokemon because they play one of most of their attackers. But then Super Rod gets it back to the deck, and then you need to go search it out again. And so I think Nightly Stretcher is really, really good. I'm not super excited about it, I wouldn't say, because it's kind of boring in my opinion, but it's very good.
It's a good solid item card, and that game needs those, right? Look, we've all uh, rotted to get a Pokemon back in the deck, and then we got a Nest Ball it back into play. So this does it all at once. So it is very good, and of course it goes to hand, so you can play it onto the bench for an ability as well, which is always good.
Yeah. So to me, those are all the cards that we talked about. Maybe not Haxorus and certainly not Crobat, but those are the like most important cards in the set.
Big
But
ones.
where do you want to move next?
Well, there's one other card that I definitely want to talk about. That's Neutral Center, and I'm not sure how good it's going to be, but this is an A spec. This is to be the only A spec I probably am going to want to talk about. The A specs are pretty underwhelming. I think you agree with that. This one's a stadium, and I believe it's the first stadium A spec that we've had.
Yeah, I
And,
believe that's true.
and I don't think the old A specs weren't stadiums at all either,
No,
were they?
they were all items, kinda.
Just items.
But then there were tools, which were items at the time.
Right. So prevent all damage done to Pokemon that don't have rule boxes by attacks from your opponent's EXs and V Pokemon. So it's a lot like Mimikyu, which sees some play. At one point, it saw a lot of play. It kind of fell off. It's around for sure though. And then the weird part is if this card is in your discard pile, it can't be put into your deck or hand. They did that with other ace specs too. Maybe for this one it makes sense. Maybe it's too good of a threat. That the problem is a stadium. Obviously, it can get bumped, and then you can't get it back. So that's the big downside, right? It can get lost vacuumed. Of course, it gets lost then. But also, if they just play another stadium and bump it, since you can't get it back into play. I don't. There's nothing that I know that gets it from your discard pile into play, right? If there was that, this doesn't say you can't do that, but I don't think there's anything that makes that happen. So, but look, my big question is this going to be the ace spec you want to play in Snorlax? Because you've recently done a video about the top cards in the game, right? Based upon some limitless data you got.
Yeah, just based on
And
pure win rate.
pure win rate. And most of those cards are control cards, right? I think
Like half.
half, and I think Snorlax was high on
Yeah,
that list,
Snorlax
correct?
was number two on the list. So
So it's a thing, probably more of a thing than most of us like. But obviously, if you put your Snorlax there, you're gusting and making life difficult. But now you make your Snorlax immune to EX and V. So even if they switch in their attacker, they might not be able to do you any damage. I think that's now they'll get around it eventually. But if it takes them a couple turns to get around it, now you've got another chance to disrupt and do all that stuff in the meantime. So
but
what are your thoughts about this
to me,
card?
my big question though, then why wouldn't you just put like Mimikyu in the active, right? Obviously, Snorlax is annoying, but Mimikyu is this, but not an ace spec. If you're not like attacking, I think this is more
Hmm.
useful in like something like Ancient Box, where Ancient Box you're all single prizers and
Hmm.
in all non-rule box, and then obviously a lot of people are playing EX and Vs. So then
Yeah.
if you can buy multiple turns with Ancient Box, you can be in a very favorable position. So I think that's where it would be better to me than in Snorlax, because Snorlax you have Mimikyu, and Mimikyu
Yeah.
has mediocre attack, not terrible, but not that good. Um, and so you can so it's like in Snorlax you don't need to be attacking though, so you just leave it in the active.
Hmm.
But in decks we need to be attacking, that you can't be just sticking Mimikyu in the active. I think it's better.
Okay. I hadn't thought of something like Ancient Box, and I like that. And one of the reasons I think this could see play is Ancient Box decks, because I've been looking at those lately. They're not set on we need this ace spec. There's some diversity of ace specs, and part of what that means is that none of the ace specs does exactly what the deck needs, which means a different ace spec is more of a possibility for it. So I think this you could put this in without ruining the ancient deck, some decks need a certain A spec. So ancient box does not. So I like it for that. That's good. Obviously, the real the fragility is it's easy to get out of play. So how long can you expect it to stick around? And it might not. You're probably going to average a couple turns on it, so it just might not give you enough value. That's to me the big negative to the card.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of times it won't give you essentially any value. Your opponent will just instantly bump it. I think you need to kind of play a game
Hmm.
of chicken and understand what your opponent might be running in their list,
Yeah.
and also what they could have in their hand and in their deck and prizes and stuff like that to
Hmm.
be able to figure out when you can play this. Because if you play it at the end of the game when your opponent's already used up all their stadium bumps,
Right.
then this is it just wins you the game. Essentially, it
Hmm.
depends on the exact circumstances, but it could kind of just do that. But then if you're, you could also do that. You could kind of taunt your opponent with this card, and then play some other stadium that's good, like jamming tower, right?
Hmm.
And then they'll be like, oh, I want to bump jamming tower, but if I bump jamming tower, then I'm not gonna be able to bump neutral center. So you can essentially get jamming tower in play with neutral center as like this bait card to kind of
Hmm.
trick your opponent into leaving this other stadium in play.
Right. And yeah, no, I agree about that for sure. And then, of course, lost vacuum is one of the ways to get it out too. So this whole baiting thing, also tools can fall into that as well, right?
Yeah,
If
that's
there's
true. That's true.
you could play a tool that your opponent you're going to try to get them to lost vacuum to keep this stadium to stay, or you could use this stadium, but knowing that you have a tool or two that are also just as critical or more critical in your deck too. So that you probably you need other stadiums or tools probably that you want to stick around because you're never guaranteed to get this to stick around for long.
Yeah, and then is there more to say about neutral center?
No, I
I
think
don't
that's
think so.
plenty. So, uh, you want to bring up something else you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
I want to talk about the other two aspects real quick. They're both items. They're both kind of bad.
Yeah.
The one says your opponent's active is now burned and confused. This isn't terrible. It's called Dangerous Laser. If you know anything about the card Hypnotoxic Laser, you know that card was
Hmm.
good. It's poisoned. Burn is essentially directly better than poison in the current standard format. It's a little different, but it's generally better. Theoretically, it doesn't get as much support, but it is just extra damage. But
Hmm.
then burn and confusion. You can like do stuff, but it's pretty niche. It has certain unique combos, but it's generally kind of bad because it's like as opposed to getting a gust to win the game or like setting
Right.
up or giving up one less prize or something. But then Poke Vital A is the other ace spec. Heal 150 damage from one of your Pokemon, but then it can't be recovered from the discard pile into your
Yeah.
deck or hand, so it can't be Poke stopped. And like, why? It's not that good. And I think you said that earlier as well with Neutral Center that this ace spec had its downside.
Yeah, I mean the fact that right, you can't get it with Pokestop ever. I don't think not in standard. I'm not sure even sure in expanded. And healing 150 is okay, but you can only have one copy, so it's not like it would be broken. I think if it didn't have that bottom line of text, I think if it didn't have that thing that you can't recover it, you might play it. I'm not even sure without that if I would play it over something else. But I think that just makes it unusable. And the dangerous laser, if it even if it wasn't an ace spec, would be questionable. It would see some limited play,
Yeah,
but
I
as
think
an
it would
ace
be
spec,
solid if it wasn't an ace spec because it's kind of like free damage, but it's like it would be like a solid item card, but not like a super broken item card. I don't think it would be annoying, right? But
it would go in a few decks, but I don't think it would see a ton of play. But certainly as an ace spec, it's I don't think it's very good.
yeah. And then there is one last card that relates to ace specs, which is Genesect from which is a
Mm,
metal Pokemon here, and it
yep.
has an attack, but whatever. We'll ignore the attack. It doesn't really matter. But Ace Canceller, the ability, as long as this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached, which can be any tool, then your opponent can't play any ace spec cards from their hand. They can use ace
Yep.
specs if they're already in play, like a stadium or a tool, and then they could accelerate Legacy NG if they're playing like Lugia or something like that.
Right. So yeah, no, it's an interesting card. How good is it going to be? I don't probably not. Obviously, the gusting
Prime
item is
Catcher.
very good. Prime catcher, yeah, sorry, is very good, and that wins games. So stopping prime catcher is a big deal. Um, and some others as well, but it doesn't stop everything. It doesn't shut off ones that are in play. right? So if they've already got the tool attached, it sticks around, it still works. Um, so and it's at least two decks. Well, you have this card, and you have to have a tool. So assuming you already have tools, it's okay. If you don't really have tools in deck, now that's at least two deck slots, which isn't good. So, I'm not sure how much play it'll see. It's interesting to see what it'll do. I'm not in love with it, but I am looking forward to see what happens
Yeah,
with
I
it.
will say also one of the tools that sees the most play, the most played tool I assume is Force Seal Stone, but then after that,
Hmm.
one of the big ones is Technical Machine Evolution or any of the technical machines. Those do
Yeah.
not work here either because they fall off. So that's another downside to this card.
Right. So, like I single prize decks sometimes I play like EXP share or something, but so it's limited. There is one more card I definitely want to talk about though. Do we cover Genesect?
Oh, I will say you could put Rescue Board. That's the best tool.
Hmm.
There's Garbodor and expanded. That card's way better than this, but you will often put a tool that
Right.
gives it free retreat. You could do that with Genesect, and now it's a pivot, and now it just isn't completely
Yeah.
useless outside of this one niche case.
Yeah, yeah, rescue board is the best thing because it gives you a pivot, so as well. And obviously that goes in a number of decks anyway, rescue board some. So and most decks play Arvin, so dropping a tool in to get a pivot in this has value.
Yeah.
All right, so the other card I want a Pokemon I want to talk about. I told you this before things too, and I was forgetting about it. Is the I've scrolled too far. It is the Kingdra,
Yeah,
and I
I
scrolled to
got it
the other
here.
set. Yeah, why don't you read it?
Oh, and by the way, the site we're using is PokemonProxies.com to view the cards if you are watching it. If you're listening, then it doesn't matter. But yeah, so it has both sets together here, and these are all the sets that aren't out in English. But
Yep,
Kingdra EX here has two attacks. It's a stage 2 EX with 310 HP. It's water
yep,
and Hydro Pump. Classic attack. We see it on Kingdra all the time. 50 base damage for two colors, 50 more for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. Um,
yep.
Also, it's lightning weak, which for some reason looks very green or
Yeah,
gray
yeah,
on the
almost looks
prox.
like metal colored or something. It's not very yellow here in this
Yeah, as you
printing.
go from Horsea to Seadra to Kingdra, it like fades more. It's kind of strange. But anyway, and then King's Order, the first attack for one water, put up to three water Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench.
And that's an interesting attack, right? I don't know how good it's going to be, that attack, but it's
I think it's not
obviously,
that. I mean, it's kind of slow, right?
well, because it's on a stage two, right? So you've got
Yeah.
to get this stage two. It's interesting though, because obviously it gets evolutions onto the bench, so you can get your Excalibur directly on the bench. I'm not sure what you're doing with it, but it's an interesting idea, right? So I think that's part of why I like this, just because that's one to think about. What can I do with that King's Order attack? Can I get value out of it in a deck? Maybe it's the second attack though is the more viable one, right? Hydro Pump 50 per plus 50 per each water energy attached. So assuming you just play water and you're not going to attack with it with like a double turbo attached. So you're going to have at least two water energies. So 150, that's not great. But we have the whole swim freely set of cards, right? Which this and there is the stage one with a swim freely ability on it, and then that pairs with the Finion, which has the oceanic accompaniment ability. As often as you like during a turn, you may attach a water energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon that has the swim freely attack. So you can accelerate energies on to the stage one. You get the other Seadra with the swim freely ability and power it up on the bench. So it makes it viable, is what I'll say.
Is the idea like you go second, turn one, TM evolution, then turn two, you accelerate a bunch of energies, then evolve? Is that like the idea? Because it's really awkward being a stage two that you manually evolve. Gardevoir does
Mm-hmm.
that, but the stage one's like super good. Seadra's okay, I guess, but it's not that good. It's 20 snipe for each water energy attached to it, which is it's okay. But yeah,
Well,
like
you
this.
also have
Oh,
in that deck. I mean, you have the Finion, of course, to accelerate the energies. The Swim Freely is on Seeking, Dugong, um, the Seadra, and the Luminion. So there are some other ones that evolve from it, and even some of those have attacks. So there have been Finion Swim Freely decks in the past. Actually, that's one of the starter decks. I don't remember if that's the current
yeah, no,
starter
that
deck or
was
last year's starter deck.
I think it's a
Um,
current start. I don't remember. I
it,
made a video on Swim Freely. I said it was like really good. I have not played it yet. But trust me,
Look, I've
it's a really broken deck.
it's underwhelming from Freely. I will say because I like that type of thing. It's fun. So what can it do with the Kingdra? Look, I think that's what you're going to go with, right? I don't think you're going to play it in your Excalibur
Yeah,
deck
maybe. I think
because
you
you have.
could do it with backscab. Also, I will say you could Salvatore. I forgot about that. But
Mhm.
Kingdra EX, like it's okay. Its damage output's comparable to Chien-Pao EX. It's pretty similar. But
Yeah,
then the big issue is it's a stage two, but then it does have higher HP and you don't discard the energy, both of which are really nice. The
right.
HP is like noticeably, it's 90 more, which is very
Hmm.
meaningful in certain matchups. So I think Kingdra EX actually could be played just Kingdra Excalibur. But the swim freely idea is really interesting.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought of the Salvatore because the Salvatore evolves into one without an ability, so you could have the swim freely, get your energy attack accelerated, and then you evolve into Kingdra and
Yeah,
attack
I mean
away.
none of them
So,
have the Seadra also doesn't have an ability because swim freely is just an attack. It's a
oh, that's
essentially a
right.
useless attack. So, but it's not an ability.
That's right. You're right. It's just the Finion has the ability, and of course that you don't not evolving from. So it doesn't. You're right. Had forgotten that. I was thinking of an ability because it's kind of in that vein, but
Yeah,
it's
it definitely
not.
feels like that. But then I don't know, I feel like Kingdra is not the best. There are four, no, sorry, there's I think six EXs in this set. There's
Hmm.
the four Darkness ones. There's Kingdra EX, and I want to talk about Revervoom as well, real quick. Um,
Yep.
has two attacks here. One accelerating flash. If this Pokemon move from the bench to the active, you do 140 for one metal, which is solid. I think Revervoom, there's two Revervooms which are kind of cool. There's one
Hmm.
that just does a classic like rally back style attack, which just does 120 if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn. Oh no, there's three. There's the EX, which can have like four tools. And then there's the
Oh yeah.
single Parasite, which is like an engine. Well, okay, it's literally an engine, but it's also an engine card. It lets you draw cards.
Yeah.
Then
And
also,
this one, by the way, is Terra. It's a
oh
lightning
yep,
type. I don't think you mentioned that. So it hits
yeah,
for a
I'm not
different
sure, but
weakness as well. It still takes metal energy like they do, but it becomes a lightning type.
yep,
And
and
then
it has a
changes.
different weakness. Yep,
Yeah, it is fighting weak. So it changes both what it hits for weakness and what its weakness is.
yep, and then Speed Break for three metal does 250 discard this card and all cards attached to it, so it's kind of hit and run. It's really weird, but it
Hmm.
like removes itself from play, which is kind of funny. Not too much to say about it. I think River Rooms have gotten cool cards though. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
the
I just want to say because this was on my maybe list just briefly, and I'm not sure with the speed break, the one 250 and goes in the deck. I don't think that's going to be all that good. Plus, you need the three energies, and I'm not sure what I want to hide behind for a wall with it. It is stage one though, so it's a lot better than stage two. But the first attack I think is has potential and definitely something I want to try out. Just so 140 for one energy as long as it swings into the active. So it's kind of it's an affordable. It's like Urshifu VMAX in a sense, but on a two prizer, right? At
well, but
280
Urshifu's
HP.
better attack, Abstract Urshifu VMAX, it's better attack was its second attack though.
Correct, but you would use the first. Look, I think 140 on 280, I can swing into the active. I could turret out of play, and that's okay, and just send up another one. Is if you could try something like that where you're looping attacks with it and trying not to give up prizes.
Yeah, and it does one shot Lugia V-Star as well, which is
Yeah.
kind of cool. There are a few
Okay.
other Pokemon I want to talk about.
Yep.
This one I guess is kind of good. It's Blood Mercy Luna. Rule of
Hmm.
Thumb is its ability, which is kind of weird. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to your bench, you can attach up to two basic fighting energy cards from your hand to it, and it is fighting type, 150 HP as well, which is high for basic, but
Hmm.
Mad Mud Bite for three energies, two of which are fighting. 100, and it does 30 more damage for each damage kind of on your opponent's
Oh, there it
active,
is.
which is
Hmm.
interesting. You can pair this with a lot of different things because it accelerates energy to itself. You could do it
Yeah.
with Roaring Moon EX. No, sorry, Raging Bolt EX.
Raging Bolt.
Um,
Yeah.
so an Arcanine V, you can do it with
My boy.
yeah, with Iron Valiant EX. There's a bunch of different things you could do.
Yeah, I mean the rule of thumb, right? Its attack, I think, is underwhelming.
It's okay
Uh,
for if you view it as one energy. It's pretty good, but it's not one energy. It's three energies, but you can get the energies. But you don't need to
you can
accelerate some other way.
Right, but you have to have them in hand, so
Yeah.
it's not the easiest thing. But it's really for things that want energy in play. I think, right? That's where the value comes in with other attackers, and then you might attack with this as well. But you need something else that you're attacking with that needs energies in play. Like you said, like the Raging Bolt, I think, is a logical choice. It may work in it. I'm not sure if it's the best way, but it is the same type of energy, unlike the Teal Mask Ogerpon. So something to consider there.
Yeah, there's a few other. So there's the ancient Pokemon, Slitherwing, which is fighting, counters future Pokemon, and then which it like one shots Iron Hand ZX and
Hmm.
Iron Thorn ZX, and then there is the Iron Moth, which is future Pokemon counters ancient Pokemon, walls them off. It's a fire Pokemon though, so kind of awkward there. Um, and then there's a
Hmm.
Zoroark, which I think is pretty interesting. Phantom Jack for two colorless on a stage
Yeah.
one. 60 times multiplier for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX and V in play. So this can be hitting 180, 240 range, and then double turbo, you're knocking it down to maybe 220. But that's like okay. It's not super good in general, but there are times when it'll be really nice. So as like an attacking option, I think it's solid. It's a little weak, but it's okay.
I like it. It was definitely one I that deserves mentions. You can pay for it with a double turbo, and you're still hopefully doing enough damage to take a knockout, right? That's the key thing with it. Obviously, you wish you had the old Zoroark that could. Although no, you can't transform into
Yeah,
it,
we could
but
just
you
evolve
could.
into it.
Right, you just manually evolve it. So you'd play that if that Zoroark was in format with the transformative whatever
Yeah,
ability.
Phantom Transformation, I think.
That sounds correct. Yeah, would probably go in that deck. There's a number of cards to see. Oh, this deck card wants that deck, but it still can see play for sure.
Yeah. And then are there any other Pokemon you want to talk about?
I mean, the only the Zoroark. I mean, the Malamar maybe because he's my boy, right?
Yeah, no, well, you like the Rapid Strike Malamar,
That
but
that's true, true, and it works with the supporter 006 plan, which I don't know if you wanted to mention that or not.
yeah, but Malamar, if you play Jurassic's Plan for one darkness, switch in one of your opponent's bench to the active, and it does 100 damage to the new active. It's kind of like the 100.
120.
Oh, sorry, 120. Yeah, it's essentially a 120 snipe. If you play the 06 Machinations, is what's translated here. But there's so
Yeah.
let's talk about that card now. It says
But
this.
hang on. So the Malamar 120 to any one Pokemon that can close out games for you. So
Yeah,
right,
no, it's not bad. It's like solid. If you didn't have to play the 06, it would be a very solid card. I don't think it would be broken, but it would see play.
and even then it needs darkness energy. So in a darkness deck, maybe is what I'll say with it. But go on to the supporter.
Yeah, 06, whatever. It says your opponent discards cards from the hand until they have three cards in hand. So there's a new card from Stellar Miracle or Stellar Crown, which is it's the main set. That is, I
Hmm.
think it's going to be super broken with this card, but that's not out yet, and we'll talk about that later. We've talked about it on the podcast. I've talked about it on my channel, but I think
Hmm.
it's interesting there. But in standard right now, I think it's kind of underwhelming. Um, Most of the time, you have three cards that are really the most important. Sometimes one of those cards might be Ultra Ball, which is an issue because you need to discard two other cards. But
Right.
generally, assuming you're not pairing this with Luxray V, I don't think it'll be super good. Or Luxray V, Luxray EX, some other hand disruption card. And then paired with those cards, it's a little gimmicky. It is your supporter for the turn. So I don't think
Hmm.
this card's super good. What do you think?
No, I mean, look, sometimes I'll play like mill decks. I haven't in a while, and one of the strategies against mill is your opponent just builds their hand size, right? So they can hold off an Iono late game. So if they get 20 some cards, and so then they'll get 20 plus cards in hand. So obviously this is a crushing supporter in that, but that's not a lot. It's not a huge value most of the time.
Yeah, and in those situations, the item card Hand Trimmer is also about as bad, discarding them down
Hmm.
to five cards in hand. If they're discarding most of their hand anyways, I think it's still like about as good. But then
Right.
there's
You have to discard as well with that though.
yes, you do. But generally, most of the time, you don't have more than five cards in your hand, or I guess six
Hmm.
with the supporter or the card you're playing.
With the item, right?
Yeah.
That one's an item. Yeah.
But then we have Cassiopeia as well.
Hmm.
Cassiopeia is in a supporter that I think is really cool. You can only play this if it's the last card in your hand. I always think this is fun. It's obviously not like a good thing to have to do that, but
Right.
search your deck for up to any two cards and put them into your hand though, which is cool. Potentially really good
Yeah.
with rare candy decks as well.
No, I like it. It's yeah, it's definitely one I had some interest in discussing. It's kind of like the old peony, right? That was easier because you discarded your hand, you search for two cards, right?
Yeah.
Here you have to get to no cards in hand.
Oh
That
no,
makes it
Peony
tricky.
search for any two trainer cards. So
Oh, this is any two cards, which is very good. I was just doing the one the Hisuian Arcanine recently that wants to have no cards in hand. So a deck like that, you're built to get to no cards in hand. This would be a nice addition to that deck because at one point, you have cards to discard, and then I grab any two cards that I make sure I can play, and I put myself in a better position. So not I don't think that's where it's going to see most play, but it's an interesting card.
Yeah. Are there any other cards you want to talk about? I feel like that's about it. There are some other like kind of cool cards, but
Just two quickly, I'll say one is Nighttime Academy or Night Academy. It's going to be the next set's when it's going to be important. Right now, you put each player during their turn can put a card from hand on top of their deck. Right now, it's not overly valuable.
yeah, it
I
can
did
protect you against Iono,
right.
which is nice.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to want to play a supporter for that in your deck, but yes, it
Yeah,
does
or
that.
Stadia.
If people start playing that, if you remember back to the Mu EX days, then people started to play Judge in the deck because it got around that. So
Maybe
that's
Max, right? Sure.
yeah, Mu VMAX, sorry, because that just shuffles in, right, instead of drawing from the top. So I did a Kieran VMAX deck. So you want to go try Kieran VMAX, which is obviously the GOAT there. This would be great in that. You put your water energy on top of the deck, boom, accelerate it. So loving that there. But the next set's when it becomes good.
I don't
Or if
know
you
if
want to play
good's
gut,
the right term, but
well,
interesting.
viable. It's anyway, it's important at that point. But or a gutsy pickaxe, which I like. You want to be able to guarantee energy acceleration. So maybe, but it's not huge, right? And then the other card I think is more interesting is Power Hourglass. It's an item. It's a tool card. At the end of your turn, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, you may attach one basic energy card from your discard pile to that Pokemon. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it will have value in some decks. What that is exactly is going to take some figuring out. But one of the things, like if you're playing a Rotom V deck, you want to you get an extra, you Rotom Ving, so you don't need the energy on to attack that turn. But when you end your turn, boom, you get an extra energy and play your attach per turn, and then you accelerate one. I think it's nice. Or decks that are discarding energy, like the Raging Bolt deck, right? If you attach Power Hourglass, then you're getting one of those energies you discard it back, as long as you're in a matchup that you're not going to get one shot.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting card. I don't think it's super good, but it's kind of fun.
Okay, so those are the cards that I want to just add on at the end.
Yeah, I'll quickly mention Weavile as well. This one says it does 70 in paralysis, and then discard all energy from this Pokemon.
Hmm.
But then Power Hourglass will allow you to recover the energy. So automatic paralysis is pretty good. I guess theoretically it's good if your opponent doesn't have switching. If they're playing
Right.
Pac-Man EX, it's terrible because it doesn't really do anything. But I think it's interesting. I don't think it's that good, but I've heard a few people in the comment section bring it up and yeah, say that they think it's. I mean, it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, look, these are to me those are cards like that are the interesting cards. You think about it and you think, okay, where could it go in? It could have value in this deck or that deck. Those are the cards to me that are the most interesting, rather than like the Loyal Three, which for the March part, the main one, it's a deck, right? To me, that's more boring in my world.
Yeah, although they can be used in other decks. But anyway, I think that's all for today's episode. We went a little long, but we wanted to cover everything we thought was important in the set. But we hope you enjoyed the podcast. Consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channels, 10 Types and Uncommon Fossil. And also, you can check us out on podcasting platforms if you want as well. We're on YouTube, which obviously has the video, and then the podcast does not have the video. So that might suit you better. But we
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed. And as always, we're excited to see you next time.
Take care.